I became very interested in the basic biological aspects of agriculture. So agriculture is biology. Agriculture is production biology. You can define it that way. And agriculture is facing some major challenges right now with climate change. And the answer to these challenges is in the plants already, because plants evolved already to deal with challenges. So plants and every organism tries to occupy any possible niche to live in. And so they occupy some very difficult places. We sometimes call these extremophiles, and we don't think of plants as extremophiles, but some of them are. Among plant species, within a genus, species adapt to different conditions. They specialize, so to speak. And so some of these plants grow on the conditions that nothing else can grow, on very dry conditions. Others will grow under very wet conditions. Now, the ability of these plants to adapt to these conditions is in their genome, is in their genes. And so if we can figure out what makes them handle these very difficult conditions, then we can use this information, this genetic information, to make crops to survive under these very similar conditions. And these conditions are coming, and we already sense it with climate change. So some areas, due to climate change, are expected to be very dry and extremely hot. Others will be more wet and humid. And so we are looking at plants that adapted already to these conditions and see if we can use their genetic information to make crops adapt better when these conditions are coming. Yeah, actually I work with grapevine, and it might surprise you because we don't have a very large grapevine industry here in Missouri, but we have wild grapes, and we have several different species, about 8-9 species of grapes, wild grapes that grow in the forests, and you can see them climbing on trees. And some of these adapted to conditions that are either very humid and moist, floodplains, for example, along rivers. Others adapted to extremely dry and hot conditions. And by trying to find out what determines at the molecular level the ability of these plants to grow under these conditions, and actually they thrive under these conditions, then we can use the information from their genome to help crops adapt to these conditions. And so I'm working with, as part of a larger group, we have a research consortium of scientists from University of Missouri, St. Louis University, and the USDA. And we work together collecting wild grapes and studying gene expression in these wild grapes. And later we'll study the genome of these wild grapes, the DNA itself, and see what the difference between them, what causes them to adapt to these different conditions. And so nowadays we have a revolution in genetics, with DNA sequencing becoming very inexpensive. So for relatively small amount of money, you can generate enormous amount of sequence information, either from the DNA directly or from the RNA, which represents the expressed gene of the expressed portion of the genome. So with this, we become this is an enabling, we call it enabling technology. We will be able to look at what sort of genes are expressed in one plant and what sort of genes are not expressed in other plants. And that gives us tremendous information. And again, these plants already solved some very important problems for them simply because they adapted to different conditions.